welcome one and all. Can you see me over there at the far side, Clarence? You can, good visibility.
Yep. Is it on?
Can you hear us?
Can everyone hear everybody? I suppose
Yep.
we'll find out in due course. Excellent. Well, the purpose of this session is really to uncover some of the do's and don'ts of investing in Papua New Guinea, and that could be from any different perspective. We've got 4 very different perspectives looking at the same problem to a certain extent on this panel today. So from the government regulatory side, we have Clarence from the IPA. As far as somebody who is involved intimately in the fabric of deals on a day-to-day basis at KPMG, as far as either advising clients on one stage or actually executing those agreements on behalf of clients at another stage. Kip, of course, is a banker, so he's often the man putting up the cash for all these things. And finally, in the case of IFC, they are, of course, an investor in their own right in Papua New Guinea, but they're also working closely with government and working to actually create an environment in which deals can take place. So maybe we'll start, John, with the IFC first of all. What do you see the role of the IFC being as far as helping PNG develop as a business destination?
So I think, first the IFC, it's the sister organization to the World Bank Group. So it's part of the World Bank Group and the sister to the World Bank, which deals with the public sector side and, probably the largest private sector development institution in the emerging markets. So globally, we work with about 2,000 institutions and have mobilized about 23 billion in private sector investment. In PNG, we have a portfolio of about 370 million and probably an advisory portfolio of about 40 million. So the reason I raise that is we work both on the enabling environment and then we work in a demonstration or a convening way with major institutions to help them expand and deliver against our mandate. So I think, convening, bringing capital to play and providing an enabling environment, probably on the leading edge, helping people go where they might be less comfortable. We typically get involved in a slightly longer dated instrument and we have a longer dated view. So we might take capital markets and we will look at how we can create them, starting with legislation, working with the industry and infrastructure, and then working with institutions to do a bond, just as an example.
One of the high-profile things the IFC does around the world, of course, is that doing business survey, which is under the World Bank, but it's a very well-known survey. So basically a lot of, for example, with the work you've done with the Investment Promotion Authority, has been looking at some of the impediments to business that survey throws up and looking about how you can improve those situations. That would be an example.
Yes. Correct, yeah. And we just recently, the government approached us about the SME sector and asked us to look at how we can actually help the SME sector using that very same tool. So we're about to begin a diagnostic in that area and, hopefully come up with some ways to ease business for the SMEs in the sector.
So Clarence, moving on to the IPA, it's very important that the IPA is an investment promotion authority rather than an investment prevention authority. I'm just wondering, given the forward motion that particularly the APEC year has brought to the IPA this year, how are you looking to actually improve the situation for getting businesses registered and up and running and functioning properly and making sure they tick all the boxes that they need to tick to do business in PNG?
Thank you, Andrew. I'll start by touching on some of the aspects of the ease of doing business, which we do a lot of work with the IFC. There are about 8 or 11 parameters within the ease of doing business. From the IPA perspective, I'm happy to say that when we did some work with the IFC and the World Bank in reviewing the processes in the IPA, we then introduced an online registry system, and that helped a lot in the rankings on the startup business component of the ease of doing business. As well as that, another reform that we've introduced is the access to finance through the personal property securities. That again has helped the SMEs in terms of pledging their movable assets with the financial institutions, thus allowing them to get access to finance. So that again has improved greatly our rankings, PNG's rankings in terms of the ease of doing business from 149 down to 119. There are other areas that we still need to work together with other line agencies, as you will appreciate. Not everything falls within the jurisdiction of the IPA. For instance, things related to construction permits. These are undertaken by town authorities. For Port Moresby, for instance, it's done by NCDC. If you go to Ley, that will be done by Ley City Council. Those are areas that, again, from the IPA perspective and mainstream government policy bodies, we need to continue to talk, we need to continue to communicate with those respective agencies to see how we can then make it easy and accessible for businesses to get into. Touching on to APEC, you know, everyone talks about the opportunities that we believe APEC will bring to PNG. From the investment promotion perspective, we run two committees under the APEC arrangements. This is the Investment Experts Group and the Intellectual Property Experts Group. There is a lot of work in terms of policy, and where businesses are directly involved, we are trying to bring to the forefront the involvement of this SME sector. So we're concentrating on areas of inclusive growth, inclusive partnership between private sector and the local people. Some of the work that we are doing now will be in just about a week time, from the 11th to the 12th, we'll be conducting a consultative workshop on inclusive business, again with international speakers and those with the experience in that field, to come and share in the hope that we will then establish some sort of center of excellence where people can learn in how an anchor investment can work with the community in the inclusive agenda.
Thank you, Clarence. Zanie, you're involved, obviously KPMG is a large full service practice, but in the area of establishing businesses or even acquisitions of businesses and sales of businesses, what sort of work are you finding you're getting particularly busy with in Papua New Guinea?
Well, you mentioned the two areas, so we get involved with both the establishment of new businesses from overseas investors as well as acquisitions by overseas investors of PNG businesses. So generally, we find ourselves involved in all aspects, from business setups for first-time investors in PNG through to establishing the business, tax and structuring advice, visa migration services, which is all part of the startup side. And in that regard, we've also been working more closely with the IPA through our Doing Business in PNG publications and work that we've been doing. In terms of what we've seen more recently is acquisitions by overseas investors. And where we get involved in there is around the advisory side. We're on the ground, we understand the business environment. So we provide advice on potential investments. Because of our large range of clients, we know which clients are looking to sell, others overseas clients that are looking to acquire. So we get involved in due diligence, buy and sell side, data room modeling, and specifically valuations. So during 2018, we found more of the transactional acquisition type arrangements. 2019, and especially from the middle of 2019, we are expecting a lot of increase in the startup side.
What would be driving that, do you think?
Mostly driven by what we've seen in 2012 around the previous LNG project. If the announcement around the investment is going to be done by the end of this year, and next year is planned to be the FEED process for the new LNG project, with a final investment decision probably end of next year. So we expect 6 months before that, a lot of the hopeful and potential subcontractors would be coming into the country and setting up businesses and looking for tax structuring advice and establishment company registrations.
Kip, Westpac has recently restructured its business in the Pacific to refocus on its, I guess, the major markets of Papua New Guinea and Fiji. Looking at the kind of business that you're encouraging your clients to do, what kind of deals are you seeing? What kind of action are you seeing as far as either acquisitions or setting up new businesses? What kind of trends are you detecting on the ground?
Well, I suppose at the moment, and probably for the last 12, 18 months, it's been pretty tough, you know, and we've actually seen a lot of businesses primarily right-sizing their business and reducing, you know, their exposure and so on in Papua New Guinea. And one of those reasons is due to a lack of access to foreign exchange, you know, if they're importers and so forth. And the others, the sort of dampening of domestic demand. So we haven't seen a heap of activity. We've seen some activity around those with strong corporates at the bigger end of town, so not the SMEs, but the larger corporates that have got strong balance sheets, looking at acquisition in a complementary area. So that would add to their group. We've also seen some investments in property by some of those corporates as well. So, you know, where they're actually acquiring some of their own property rather than leasing and so forth. But like Zanie said, you know, we're expecting going forward, you know, probably the back end of, well, probably realistically 2020 to see, you know, a lot more investment, and particularly as those contractors and so on come forth and prepare for those initial investment phases of those resource projects. So that's where we're expecting to see an uptick. We think there's a bit of caution at the moment, people waiting that next bout of activity, and when that occurs, then we'll probably see a lot more investment.
John, just to give your take, the official IFC take, or your personal take on the way PNG is at the moment, what is PNG good at as far as welcoming investment? And where does PNG really need to lift its game, in your opinion?
I think that's quite a challenging question, but so, you know, the beauty about PNG is it's a very resilient environment. I mean, it's been through a lot of challenges. And, you know, within that resilient environment, you find a lot of organizations who know how to manage risk and know how to work in PNG. And that's a critical component in finding an investment, is your sponsor. Your sponsor is someone who really knows their environment, knows how to work within that environment. You've got unique landholder rules. You have some unique operating parameters, and to do it with the right degree of governance. I think as the two colleagues from the super fund stressed, you know, good governance is absolutely paramount. And, you know, that's probably one of the key challenges. And it's certainly an area where, you know, we put a lot of advisory effort when we work with these organizations into improving their governance and bringing them up to world-class standards. So I think, you know, the 2 points there, the one is the sponsors who you can work with, and there are a few of them, and they're good. And then the challenge is the governance, the key challenge.
Might keep your views on the same question. So where do you think PNG has strengths as far as its offering to investors, and where do you think maybe you'd like to see more action?
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, I'm reasonably new to PNG, but what I've seen so far is there are a number of sectoral advantages it has, particularly in the mineral resource space, agriculture, fisheries, tourism, coffee. So it's got a young, large working age population. So if you look at sort of macroeconomic, there's a lot of benefits there, you know, that they can unlock. So, you know, I think in the short term, I think you can see if you're trying to broaden the economy, you know, you could go for tourism, coffee, etc. Obviously, we've got 4 big resource projects coming online in the next sort of 2-3 years, and there'll be the trickle-down effects of those. Where could it improve? I think, you know, investors seek stability, and they want to get confidence that there's political stability, economic stability. They want certainty around the legal frameworks. So, you know, the Mining Act, that's under draft review at the moment. You know, there's a lot of people looking at that and wondering how that's going to come out, and people want certainty over that, particularly with these long-dated investments. Security and infrastructure, you know, I think that will come with investment, but that can be improved, and that's going to be accelerator. And again, telecommunications and so forth. But, you know, education is another space that can develop. But I think overall, you know, the opportunities far outweigh the roadblocks that are holding it back at the moment. I think if you take a medium-term view, you know, we're certainly pretty buoyant about the opportunities for this country overall.
Zanie, from your perspective, what's driving acquisitions? And there's a fair amount at the moment of acquisitions or transfer of assets and what are going on. What's driving? What are people looking for in those deals?
Well, in terms of what's driving it currently, in terms of domestic investments, it has directly to do with the foreign exchange challenges. So with the large amounts of available funds to invest in country, the local organisations have been looking at profitable companies to invest in. So certainly driven by foreign exchange, the challenges in repatriating those funds, or maybe constrained by the amount that they are permitted to invest overseas. So generally what they are looking for is firstly whether an entity is obviously a going concern, but also looking at their governance and their financial administration systems. And we have found in those instances, particularly the last 2 or 3 investments that we've been involved in, that the investors, the local investors, were prepared to pay above market value, above valuation for that. And in the past, where we were normally looking at multiples of EBITDA of about the 5 to 6, we've seen 8 in the last 6 months.
That's 5 to 6 of net profit.
Yes.
Yep. And because, why would somebody pay more for a company than they think than the market valuation? What's driving that?
The last 2-3 years downturn in the economy has put a lot of previously profitable companies under a lot of pressure. Right. So they're not profitable anymore. So if you do happen to find them and they've shown those profits against the turn of the economy, they're like diamonds. So you just pay over market to acquire them.
On the expectation with the upturn in the economy,
Absolutely.
which you heard about this morning, they're going to be
Absolutely.
they're going to be a good condition. Clarence, the origin of investment into PNG from other countries, what trends is the IPA detecting as far as where that investment is coming from, and also what sectors that investment is going into?
Typically, it's Australia that's always the #1 investor in PNG. And I have a slide, a presentation which will be uploaded on the Business Advantage website. In the recent past, there's been a huge increase in terms of Malaysian investment. So the latest statistics that we have, it's Malaysia up at the front, followed closely by Singapore, and Australia is ranking 3rd at the moment. Where it goes into is mainly, I think it's common knowledge, it goes into the forest. Forestry sector, mining and energy, and agriculture is slowly cropping up as well. So those are the main sectors that investment is going into. But as I said, it's Malaysia at the top currently, followed by Singapore and Australia.
Are you starting to see or detect some movement as far as the interest that APEC might be generating in PNG? People maybe an increase in the number of inquiries or the amount of interest that's going on in PNG? From the region?
Yes, Andrew, it's been exciting times. Despite the downturn of the economy, we've been bombarded with delegations visiting. For instance, 2 weeks ago, we had a delegation from Queensland that came up there, looking at the potential projects, Wafu Golfu, the Total projects, people going and sourcing potential business ventures, as Zanie is saying. And we also had visits from China, as usual. And quite recently, there's been some interest coming from, 1 or 2 interests coming from Malaysia, from Thailand and Vietnam. So obviously with the APEC being an active event in PNG this year, it's starting to get some signals from other APEC member economies, and which is something that we hope will continue. As we all know, investment decisions are not reached immediately on the spot. It will take some time to consider and look at what is available in PNG before foreign investors reach that investment decision.
Let's talk about risk. because that's something that obviously any investor is looking to keep under control whenever they invest in a new venture. But I guess particularly if there are investors that are new to Papua New Guinea, they may not be aware of how they need to mitigate against risk. So maybe, Zanie, from your point of view, first of all, what kind of things are you advising your clients to do when they're looking to either enter into a new deal or to come into PNG for the first time to make sure they are managing the risk of the venture?
Well, first and foremost, we advise them to take specifically tax advice and structure around the tax advice. We have seen in the past where a potential investor sets up a company structure and then after the fact requests the tax advice. That never seems to work. And that would be one large piece of advice. And the second is to do a proper due diligence. There are a much higher percentage of organizations in PNG without proper corporate governance structures, no internal audit structures, inappropriately skilled and staffed finance teams. So certainly that would be the second piece of advice. And what we have found in the past when we'd worked with the IFC before is they, for instance, as an organization would insist on a pre-audit by a Big Four firm before they make that investment decision to address some of that risk. So certainly it's around the tax advice before you determine your company structure and to do proper due diligence.
As a banker, obviously you want to make sure you make a return on that money you lend. Kip, again, how do you look at risk as far as PNG is concerned? Is it a risky place to do business, or is it about managing that risk?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. It's about managing the risk. I mean, yeah, certainly, it's an emerging market, so you've got a higher level of risk and a broader range of risks. And if you break it down, you've probably got those sort of broader governance risks that Zanie touched on, and making sure you've got the right structure to address those and the right advice at that sort of senior board level. And that, often there's a lot of valuable, PNG insiders around that have been working in this market for a long period of time. And there's a lot of value to having people that have that experience on your boards to be able to guide you through, particularly if you're new to PNG. So it's really managing the governance side of things and making sure you're set up properly, structured right, and you'll be able to invest and repatriate, etc. Then there's all the operational risks, and some of those differ, in this market compared to others. Things like I mentioned before, security, capability of staff is a key risk. Inflation, and you've got costs. We've got costs in our business that are growing 10% year on year and things like that. So it's thinking about all those sort of operational risks and having a plan, a risk management plan around how you're going to mitigate each of those, and making sure then the return is commensurate with the risks that you're taking. So
before you part with your money, you need to seek strong evidence
correct
in the proposal
Absolutely.
that all that's taken care.
Yeah.
And are PNG and the Pacific, is PNG and the Pacific particularly different from other markets that Westpac's in? Are there particularly hallmarks to this market, or is it?
I
has similarities.
You've got things in these markets around the natural environment. So, for instance, in Fiji, we have a lot of weather events and so forth that you may not necessarily have in other countries. We've had the earthquake that occurs here. So there are those natural weather events. But in terms of broader emerging market risks, probably not too different to others. We've got stability now, politically wise, which really helps. But yeah, there's probably not too dissimilar to broader emerging market risks.
So, John, as far as the IFC, as we mentioned at the beginning, has a number of investments in PNG itself, and has taken equity positions in businesses as well. So, what sort of things make a deal work, as far as your observations would be concerned? What are the elements that go into make a successful arrangement?
I think I mentioned earlier on, it's really having a good sponsor. It's having the right people in the organisation whose views are aligned, particularly to the work that the IFC does in reducing poverty and improving livelihoods and a development approach. So it's not fit for everyone in the community. And then, within that sponsor, making sure that sponsor is well and truly versed on who's who in the marketplace and managing the risk in that relationship. It's a very relationship-driven market. And so you need to have that ability. And then making sure that, IFC in its role delivers the risk mitigation tools to facilitate that. So, for example, we have with Bank South Pacific, they're looking to upgrade their environmental and social standards so that they're sort of at a world-class standard. Yeah. So we're engaging with them to help them do that. And, ultimately that is nationally in the benefit, but also it's a major risk for us. I mean, we really don't, and they see it as a major risk for them. So it's helping them, address the risks. And I think that'd be one of our sort of key differences in the marketplace is, you might not to play Westpac's roll down, but you can borrow money from a bank, but then with the IFC you'll get a lot of the other supporting services and global expertise that'll help you do that. I mean, often we will do that and then the banks will come in behind us. We might just play a crystallization role in helping people manage those risks.
So, for example, would IFC maybe take a board position on, in a company if it's investing?
Typically not.
No.
Typically we might, we might have a seat, but we wouldn't take it up.
Right. So, okay, so here's a slightly controversial question. I guess maybe I'll throw it to everybody. What kind of errors do you see where you think to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing that? Or what are common errors that you might see in this market, people doing the wrong things?
Repeating the same mistake over again.
Exactly, yeah.
It seems to be a fundamental flaw in human nature to repeat the same mistake again.
It's the definition of insanity, isn't it? So you do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Yeah.
I think another area is reliable information, and there's not always a great deal of good publicly available information. So when you're making these investment decisions, you really, in a market like this, you need to triangulate with all your different sources to make sure you're getting the best available information with the sources that you have at your fingertips, which can be quite challenging. So,
and is that lack of transparency in the market just a feature of the fact that it's a small market where there's a few listed companies and most of it is held in private hands?
Yeah, I think that and the stage of development where they're at, and as Zanie mentioned, the lack of, I guess, skilled financial expertise on the ground, and so on. So there's a raft of reasons why that's occurred as well. Plus, I mean, from a banking point of view, you've still got a massive cash economy, and so there's the informal economy is huge, as mentioned earlier in the presentations, and that produces its own risks in terms of access to information and awareness of how big that is and where the transactions are going and things like that. So that's quite a challenge.
Incidentally, if people do have some questions they'd like to ask the panel, you're very, very welcome. So if you have a question, and once you've thought of it, feel free to put up your hand. We'll make sure a microphone comes to you and you can ask the panel yourself. But Zanie, maybe we'll move to you now. Some common missteps or mistakes that people make when they're...
Well, these are pretty big ones, and it covers a variety of areas. But what we have found, the two largest errors that we've seen is not taking advice, and secondly is circumventing the rules.
Right.
We've had too many instances of companies being eager to start operations and then circumventing, for instance, the labour and immigration legislation and so forth, company setup legislation and so forth. So those would be the two biggest areas that we would have seen.
And that's really driven by what? Just an impatience to get started?
Just an impatience to get started.
Yeah. Yeah. Clarence, what are you seeing from your perspective? Obviously, you want people to follow the rules.
Yeah, but more on the promotional side. I think the two things that I've noticed recently is the need for businesses coming in to make sure you get all the information that you need, do your proper information due diligence, and the IPA, obviously, from the promotional side of things, we're there to help you, provide that information. And one of the things that I've seen, and I'll call it maybe stupid, that a couple of businesses have been doing lately is advancing money. And at the end of the day, they don't get what they pay for, and then they come running to IPA. Right now, I'm having to deal with 3 cases where companies have advanced money and the products are not given to them. So that's pretty stupid. I mean, who pays like that? That's something that business should be very, very aware of and avoid doing such actions in future. Yeah.
So when you get a new investor walking to your door, do you have a kind of a series of some succinct advice you give them as far as how they should be behaving in the market? Yes,
there is a promotional, well, the IPA is one such unique organization when it comes to investment promotion things, in that it does investment promotion on the one hand, and on the other hand, we regulate businesses as well. So there's a promotional side section within the IPA that collates all this information. Our most recent publication is the compilation of a regulatory handbook, where we've got about 45 different regulations, and we've captured that into one. So that's information that will be made available to businesses. And there's a team there that will, aside from promotion, will facilitate information with you and give you leads to who to talk to Zanie, or give you contacts at the IRC or immigration if you have issues. That's something that we provide free of charge to businesses. Or if you have any queries at all, any policy issues with the government, we play the mediatory role to try and consult and come to an amicable conclusion on those.
Does anyone have any questions for the panel? If you do. Yes, there's one on the far side. Can we get a microphone to this gentleman? Is that possible? If you'd just like to introduce yourself, and then please feel free to ask your question.
Sure, thanks. Hi, I'm Varun from ANZ. I have the benefit of having quite a few fresh eyes on because I've been in the country only for 3 months. I have a question for which probably I'll, just to diversify the discussion. Besides the resources sector, if each of you had a choice to put your focus and energies and investments into an ancillary sector besides the resources, which can probably change or have a maximum impact on the fabric of PNG, which one would you do? Because, sorry, each of you are from very different sectors, but essentially work in the entire same community. But which one would you pick up?
Which sectors would you put your money in?
Tourism, health, telecom, education, agri.
So I guess we're asking for a personal opinion here rather than the opinion of your organisation. John, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, broadly, from the IFC's perspective, we develop a sort of rolling 5-year strategic plan, and within that plan, we pick particular sectors. And it's not just one. I mean, we'll be looking at a couple, and we're aligned to the government on that. So we'll be looking down the agricultural sector. And then within the agricultural sector, it's really picking the institutions there. You wouldn't be working on the front line with the smallholder farmers, but you'll be working with the larger institutions like the Mainland Holdings, or you'd be working with Wafi Goldpu on its whole development of its new road and development down that side of things. Or similarly on the tourism, you'll be looking at, key institutions there that you can focus on. In many cases, it's service institutions that cut across a number of industries. It's not a very big economy, so, you have to be a bit more of a generalist, and often the institutions are, they work across multiple sectors.
Kip?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say infrastructure. So clearly, there's a lack of or good quality infrastructure across the country in a number of different subsectors. And I think, there's an opportunity now for PNG with these resource projects coming online and APEC coming up to really showcase the country in terms of that, opportunity for investors to invest in infrastructure. You've got the political play where you've got, China now coming into the picture and offering a lot of investment and aid into Papua New Guinea, and then the response, obviously, from other countries, including Australia and so on. So there's an opportunity really to drive some of these infrastructure projects, and there's different ways you can fund them. So you can look at things like public-private partnerships and things like that, which rather than traditional just the government doing them and so forth. And look at linking them to these resource projects as they come online and linking those up, and then having the ancillary benefits of them flowing into broader agriculture and other sectors that can benefit from those infrastructure plays out of those resource projects.
Okay. Zanie?
I fully agree with what John and Kip said. My perspective is the manufacturing, food manufacturing for now, as a larger sector or market sector, certainly the SME market, which will be more challenging as it will fall below the investment hurdle for a lot of the large organizations. So it is a question of determining how that can be operationalized. And then the third area that I would probably look at, and this is more of a future look, is technology.
Clarence, maybe a final word from you.
Yeah, I share the same as Zanie is saying, and the politicians have left the room, so I guess we don't really have much choice, as declared in the Alota Accord 2, the renewable resources, agriculture, tourism, fisheries, but I would definitely agree to throwing in ICT in the mix as priority areas that should be promoted. From the IPA perspective, and given the fact that we don't get the necessary support from the shareholder, we tend to work along with the renewable resources for a fact that the big boys in the mining, oil and gas, can run their own shows and get the services that they so desire. But with the agriculture, fisheries, tourism, we tend to do a lot of work with the agencies responsible, and interest that does come in to us.
Well, thank you very much for that question. Now, we are, do we have a minister arrival, Robert? Yes, we do. So we might have to cause the session to finish there, but will you please thank Clarence, Zanie, Kip, and John. Thank you very much.